Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Future Hacker. I'm your host, Anita Tandon, and today we're talking to Anita Tandon. Anita is the founder of Blink Advisory, which works with early-stage startups and incubated ventures to architect their go-to-market and growth strategy, helping them to clear their vision and get a running start. Anita has over 15 years of experience driving marketing team, including launching Brandless and heading up to D2C marketing at Education First, as well as a variety of previous roles with Google and Stitch Fix. She's also a member of the Sesame Workshop Leadership Council. Hey, Anita, it's great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Great. How are you, Maria?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much. You know, Anita, for us to start a discussion about the future of marketing, it would be cool if we could do like a recap from the last decades to today. So, let's play Marty McFly, travel back in time, and then bet our coins about the future. How does it sound to you?
That sounds great. That's one of my favorites. I like to think of myself a little more as a Doc Brown, a little eccentric, but
I love that.
I definitely have the hair for it. But yeah, let's do it. Marketing, I think, has changed so dramatically over the last several years. And, really, it's technology driven. When I think about old school marketing of the past, I think of Madison Avenue and the men of Madison Avenue really architecting and almost deciding for consumers what they wanted. Marketing was really aspirational. We put products and brands on a pedestal, really, and told people to sort of reach for the products that showed them who they wanted to be. I think, as social media came to the forefront, marketing stopped being so much aspirational and being much more relational. And it swung really, I think, the opposite direction. We stopped listening to people telling us what to like, and we started speaking to each other. The peer-to-peer networks of social media, the prevalence of online communication, and ultimately, content became king. And that really became the only way brands could speak to consumers now. They couldn't expect a consumer to come to them. They had to go to users where they were and speak to them and provide them content of relevance to sort of drive interaction. And then I think social media really kind of evolved into something inspirational. And that's where I think influencer marketing really kind of came into play. We started to sort of monetize the relationships that people developed online and allow brands to sort of be a third part of that stool. And I think in a lot of ways that was a great thing. It was a way to put sort of a trusted source in front, in between sort of a brand and a person. And that sort of idea of scrolling through your Instagram feed and wanting to replicate or sort of have that same vision of yourself became kind of a conversion point. And then the marketing of data, right? It became quantifiable, almost, to a fault. One-to-one marketing allowed sort of a level of personalization that spans both usefulness and, a feeling of privacy concerns. But ultimately, that data lent itself to being able to micro-analyze performance and drive performance in a way that we've never seen from marketing and marketing spend. And that's where some of the growth hacking and that sort of idea really came into fruition. So I guess when I think about the marketing of the future, I think of something much more intersectional. So, if you think of all these things, the data, social media, content, our websites, and then ultimately the brand, a lot of times we sort of sit in one of those nodes. But I think we really have to start to prioritize the path between them as much. And so we want to see marketing become much more fluid and much more related to different experiences for the consumer.
That's pretty cool. Thank you so much for this nice overview. And Anita, with all the technologies that we've been discussing, Marketing is for sure this super exciting field that could be taking advantage of basically anything new out there, right? As any marketer likes to do, let's segment our conversation into some specific topics. Are you ready?
Yes, all marketers do love a good framework, so I like that.
Okay, so let's do that. So first, marketing tools and customer relationship. How do you see this evolving in a couple of decades? So as you mentioned, in the beginning, it was just the companies talking as a one-way conversation. Then without digitalization, we started actually having a dialogue with people. And now we are expecting to have this hyper-connected future, right? So how do you see this playing?
It's so interesting, right? And I think maybe say something rather controversial, but I think to the detriment of the practice of marketing and to marketers, we've really traded permission for performance. And by that I mean, by looking to drive this sort of really micro-focused and incremental customer value, we've maybe a little bit thrown to the wayside that the process of earning that trust from the customer. It actually sort of reminds me back in my early days as a marketer, when we first started playing with sort of all these digital media, digital advertising sources. We all gated our landing pages. So if you clicked on a Google ad, you'd get on a landing page and we force you to give your email address before we let you really absorb anything of relevance. And we're so focused, really on driving that seemingly high performance of great lead conversion that we really ended up tearing apart the much more relevant engagements, how somebody spent their time on the site and purchase behavior. Those things kind of fell apart. And so we really sacrificed quality for quantity. And I did it just along with everybody else because it felt like the right thing to focus on. I think now, we realize more than ever that we have to earn those relationships. And that's kind of how I see, marketing evolving. In 20 years from now, we'll have seamless but acknowledged data exchange where consumers, they'll expect high fidelity interactions in exchange for interacting with the brand. And I think commerce will really be less front and center. The information exchange between a brand and a consumer will be much more in the forefront, I don't really want, a fridge that tells me I'm out of milk. I want a fridge that knew when I'd be out of milk, and put it in my last order or tells me when I'm at the grocery store the next time. And I think both parties will benefit when we sort of reorient marketing tools in that way to be in a position of usefulness to the end consumer.
Of being more relevant, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Regarding data privacy, a concern today, for sure, most definitely an issue tomorrow with this whole hyper-connected future ahead of us. Access to data will be even more intimate than what it is today with IoT, wearables, smart cities, data ownership, and the boundaries to use it. What's your take?
I think it's back to this fallacy of, trading a permission for performance. I think consumers want the kind of information that a brand can provide back. And as long as we earn that relationship, we get a much richer engagement from them. That one-to-one customization, the customer understanding we can get both, via behavioral data and data aggregation, makes our marketing stronger and more relevant. So, as an industry, I think if we invest in creating trust and transparency with customers, and they're partners in that, right? So they're providing into it and they're structuring it in a way that makes sense to them. It becomes a value add instead of an invasion. I think about my strap, which is a health tracking strap. It helps me with sleep and with my workouts. It helps me sort of manage my overall well-being. I give it explicit permission. I tell it when to measure. I tell it how to measure. And it then provides me singular information about myself, but ultimately aggregates that information so that it can give me better recommendations in the long run. And I choose to be part of that infrastructure. And I opt in with a positive sentiment towards a brand rather than a negative one that comes from a relationship that's not explicitly stated.
That makes a lot of sense. But, considering that, brands will be responsible and ethical, right? When we put into that context of being really customer centric and adding value, unfortunately, this is a lot of what we're not seeing today. And that's the reason for the whole discussion of how, brands are just reselling data and giving it away for partners that we're not aware. So the thing is that about transparency, maybe, right?
Yeah. No, I think it is. And I think, we're seeing the backlash from that. Here in the US and California, there's been a significant concern around data ownership and privacy and sort of even how you're tracked online. And so I think we're starting to see consumers reassert their ownership of their own data. And I think as a brand, if we're much more respectful of that, when we start to acknowledge that and be forthcoming, it'll change the dynamic of that conversation.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to our third topic, which is influencers marketing, which is something, relatively new, right? Do you believe it's just a current trend or maybe the probable, evolutionary path? Now regular people started having the power that before just famous ones would have, the ones on TV, right? And now basically anyone could reach that somehow. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I know. I think it's so interesting, who we think of as a celebrity these days has changed so significantly. I'd say that I think, influencer marketing has really reached its peak, I think, in its current form. When sort of the genesis of that, and I really like how you said that, right? It's democratized, I think, in a way, who can have a voice. And the people that have in the past invested the time and the energy and the sweat equity to build relevance for their audiences have reaped the benefits. And that, I think, all in all, is a good thing. But I think as we often do as humans, we sort of extract a little too much juice from something, it starts to get a little bit bitter. I think people have really started to recognize the relationship and understand the relationship between influencers and brands, i.e. that monetization of relationships. And so it changes the baseline of what really has merit for the end consumer. We don't really inherently accept recommendations. We expect, some level of context and production of value from that influencer. So, I don't really want to just see someone, pose in a beautiful space next to, a bottle of laundry detergent, right? I want to understand what they're actually doing with it, how they're interacting with that product, and see a journey. And so I think it really shifts what we accept as a valuable recommendation and really how we accept to be ultimately influenced. I think there's really a general shift away from that insta-perfect mentality. Platforms like, TikTok, for example, or even stories, celebrate a much more raw and approachable version of social engagements.
It's more like life as it is, right?
Yeah. I look at Instagram and you see someone and they're in their bedroom, they're in their bathroom. It's not perfect. There's not a perfect filter on or a soft light. Sometimes it's harsh. And I think that we're attracted to that level of humanity. And so I see that, that shift happening. I foresee brands and influencers being, much more collaborative, with influencers bringing kind of knowledge and expertise about their audience that they've developed over, in some cases, many, many years. And help brands really drive product development and iteration. I also think, what we think of as an influencer will change, right? Not just content producers that really spend their time building that from scratch, but field experts where we sort of celebrate a different type of contribution to the content base. Revia is a telemed startup focused on aging skin, and their influencer base is actually a ethnically diverse set of women, dermatologists, and that's who they're utilizing to spread the message. So it's very much coming from a sense of expertise and capability, and I think that's really an interesting evolution.
It is indeed. So, talking about this evolution and talking about the future of market, how do you see the biggest challenges that marketing leaders will face, and which skills will be needed for them to thrive in companies for the future?
I think it's really this, for marketing leaders, I think one of the biggest challenges is just this intense level of specialization that has occurred, I think, overall in the industry. I think, and I've been victim of it myself, it's very tempting to build teams of specialists, right? That can drive this ever-increasing capacity and performance. But when you have specialists and you cultivate that over the years, you start to have people that are frustrated because they can't sort of evolve into larger, broader roles. And then you ultimately end up sacrificing growth and a strategic point of view. So I think in that case, it really becomes hard to be truly innovative, multidimensional. And so what we kind of done to reorient, especially the foundational parts of our team, to be these athletes that can adapt and connect the nodes between creative and data and brand and language, and make those things work together in a way that truly reflects the end consumer. I think marketing is evolving in a lot of ways to do this, right? I want to see marketing evolve to be much more about the consumer experience. We tend to focus on these little big milestone moments in a customer journey when they purchase the first time or when they refer a friend. But when marketing teams are actually fully aligned with sales and customer service, the teams that really own the day-to-day interactions, they can up level. And as a marketer, I've done, side-by-sides where I sit and watch chat conversations or listen to phone calls with customers where I get a much different color to the picture of the customer that I get when I'm sitting, behind a computer or a bunch of numbers every day.
So Anita, changing a little bit of the topic of, discussing about marketing, you have such a great experience working with startups, right, that are trying to disrupt the market on different segments of the market. For example, you've been working with the education sector, which actually we've been covering a lot in our podcast. We can't talk about the future without bringing up education, real estate, lodging. Can you walk us through some pains being addressed and how different is the future that they're envisioning? And also, as you're working with a lot of entrepreneurs and people that are trying to disrupt their own markets, do you have any advice for them? Any advice for our future hackers, or we like calling them? Not only advice, but any message of hope maybe, because it's an environment that we're most certainly struggling more than getting our conquerors, right? It's a real struggle, right?
Yes, I know. I sometimes wish that there was this magic 8-ball that I could shake every morning to tell me what the day was going to bring. But yeah, I have been working with a lot of startups that are focused on this disruption. And I think what's really interesting is that the world has changed, right, so significantly in this last year. And if I reflect back, in the past, businesses tended to think about these interactions of customers in silos. You would think about an in-person interaction of someone walking into a store very separately than the experience they would have online or through an influencer or on social. And I think what the last year in particular has taught us is to think about the asynchronous and synchronous relationship, in tandem. And that's where the most interesting business innovations, the most interesting startups are evolving their thinking. And I think, customers are shifting their engagement patterns, right? They expect something seamless. They don't think of these at different points in time. They shift from being on their computer to walking out the door with their phone on to glancing at their wrist when they're at the store. They don't want those to be disjointed. So I'm impressed and excited the most about startups that are reflecting that in their strategy And then they want to drive and shape their relationship with consumers in that way. So, whether that's an education startup that's really revisiting the idea of community, what community means, right, both at a local level, but then sort of across the United States and more, by kind of activating latent sources of content, right? The places that you wouldn't expect content to be and information to be. Or, a real estate company that's sort of rethreading the relationship between buyers and sellers of homes, right? We haven't seen that before in a really tangible way. I think there's that break with thinking about platforms separately and thinking about, platforms and experiences as just points in the journey. So that's where I've seen the most interesting revelations. And I do think that the opportunity to leverage, AI and data aggregation is going to create much more fluid relationships. And that those relationships can create an incredible amount of power for smaller businesses to really stand in line with larger organizations, right? Before, your scale really ended up being your biggest line of defense against competitors. But we can democratize data in a new way. We can really see like a true equalization, like may the best product win, not the biggest player. I've actually always loved Malcolm Gladwell's vision of the disagreeable entrepreneur. And his thought is that the best entrepreneurs are ones that are a little disagreeable because they don't really take no for an answer. And the truth is that really anyone can recognize a broken system. I mean, how many times have you heard someone say, oh, I thought of Uber years ago, or I totally was going to do, Airbnb. And I think we all sort of know when something's broken in real estate or healthcare or education. And we know that something isn't working, but it takes a unique ability and an ability to sort of step back to truly sort of disagree and leverage your understanding of a system to create. As with any system, there are parts that work, that are optimized, that are great. And there are parts that are marginalized, that are broken, that are steeped in history rather than utility. And there's a delicacy, right? And recognize the difference between the two. So great hackers, great entrepreneurs, they don't break everything. They just break the right things. And when you find the right things to break, that's when that disagreeable resolve comes in. And you're able to say, hey, I can't accept this part of the system. I'm going to break it wide open. And when I do, I'm going to reveal the opportunity to create something that revolutionizes the customer experience.
That's pretty great. Thank you so much, Anita, for your insights. It was so amazing to have you on the show. And you know what? I think people need to hear the inspiration. Now it's the time, as you mentioned, is no longer the time that just the big corporations can get out there and do their things. It's about making a good product available to people, no matter which size it is. So that's the time for the entrepreneurs to be out there, right? And there's so much exciting things to happen. So I do appreciate you being here with us. Thank you so much. Any final words?
One of my favorite things is to say there's no such thing as a side hustle. There's only the hustle. And everything you do has purpose and meaning. And so make it have that, feel it strongly, get after it, and let it infuse every part of your life, because that's the passion that really fuels the entrepreneurial spirit.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Great way to end the interview. Thanks everybody for listening. This was Future Hacker with Anita Tandon.
Thanks, Maria. I had a great time.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.